I'm Brent Barnett on Brownfield Ag News, reporting from the Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting in Des Moines. We're talking now with Emily Skor, the CEO of Growth Energy. Emily, how are you doing here today?
I'm fantastic.
Thanks for being here with us on Brownfield. What brings Growth Energy to the Iowa Farm Bureau meeting this year?
Well, we've been having a really good conversation about the future of the industry with respect to carbon and our ability to compete in a low-carbon economy. So a lot of the conversation is about the 45Z tax credit, the clean fuel production tax credit. It goes into effect January 1. It's technology neutral. It incentivizes the production of low-carbon biofuels. And of course, an important component of that is having a low-carbon feedstock. So just had a really great conversation on all of the outstanding questions. We need signals from government that give us clarity and certainty so we can start making the business decisions that need to be made in the days ahead.
Are these issues that directly impact farmer members with Iowa Farm Bureau?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we're talking about is the government is saying, if you produce a low carbon fuel, we'll give you a tax credit. And the lower the carbon intensity, the greater the tax credit. Well, a big part of the carbon intensity of ethanol production comes from our feedstock, the corn. So there's a lot of potential if farmers start using sustainable farming practices or get credit for the sustainable farming practices they're already using, like cover crops or no-till, then there's a value. We can command a value for that fuel. We can get a tax credit and pass some of that value on to the farmer. So it's very much a partnership. And what we need are to know the rules of the road. What counts for what. We need that from Treasury, and then we can have the conversation about what are some things that we can do so we have a low-carbon feedstock and a low-carbon fuel that provides value for everybody in the supply chain.
Can you remind our listeners what 45Z is and what the future looks like for the tax credit?
It's a clean fuel production tax credit. It's a 3-year tax credit. It starts January 1 of next year. And it was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's a kind of a technology neutral tax credit that says whatever you do to reduce the carbon intensity of fuel, we're going to give a tax credit to the fuel producer, the ethanol producer. And so we are looking at what can we do potentially in terms of carbon storage, capture and storage, what can we do in terms of replacing our natural gas with renewable energy, and then what can we do with our grower partners so that we have a lower carbon feedstock. So it's a good opportunity. We need clarity from the Department of Treasury that says, all right, here's how this tax credit is going to work operationally so that we can start really working with the growers and figuring out, all right, what are the farming practices that make sense and what's the value going to be? What are we going to pay for that? Are we going to pay a premium, and what's that premium going to be for lower carbon corn?
Has there been any communication at this point from the incoming administration on 45Z?
No. I mean, it's, when you look at kind of the campaign conversation, it wasn't at this level of detail. We do know that Mr. Trump campaigned and won, and a lot of Republicans campaigned and won on maybe repealing or modifying the Inflation Reduction Act. These tax credits are part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So we know that was the campaign conversation. We also know that these investments are in primarily red GOP districts and states. And we know that we have a core group of champions, Republican champions that understand, I may not support the entirety of this IRA, but these biofuel tax credits, they make sense for the rural economy. I want to keep them in place and I want to strengthen them so we bring even more value back to the farm.
Looking ahead to 2025, aside from 45Z, what are some of your biggest priorities on the renewable fuels front?
We want to get year-round E15, finally, once and for all. We do have a president coming in who has a strong track record on E15 and is very supportive. And that, when he talked about biofuels on the campaign trail, did talk about E15. So we want to get year-round E15 once and for all. And we need some more. We need the renewable fuel standard, the RVOs for 2026. We need to be working with EPA on some rulemaking there. So, and we want to, extend these tax credits that we've been talking about. So we have a lot of things on deck, a lot in play, both on the executive branch and the legislative branch as well. We're very excited.
Several years in a row now, we've seen summer emergency waivers from the U.S. EPA regarding E15. What kind of uncertainty has that brought not only ethanol producers, but the fuel retailers that invested in the infrastructure to carry these fuels?
Well, the greatest uncertainty is we don't find out until late April, May. Are we going to get this emergency waiver? We have gotten it year over year. But because of that uncertainty, we're not seeing the investment and the commitment from the retailers that we could see if they knew this wasn't a question. They knew, I've got the opportunity to sell E15 year-round. It's no question. I'm not going to confuse the consumer. And what we continue to hear in our conversations with the fuel retailers is if we can get that certainty, we will be able to exponentially grow the amount of E15 that's sold, and that's the future of the biofuels industry.
Last question for you. Do you think we'll see as much conversation in 2025 around sustainable aviation fuel as we did in 2024?
That's a good question, and I don't think we know the answer to that. The tone of the conversation certainly is going to change in terms of kind of the federal government, because that is not kind of a stated priority of kind of what we see in the leadership change. Having said that, I've spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia this fall. There is a global conversation on sustainable aviation fuel that will continue. So if we look at the export market opportunities, if we look at the fact that airlines, their commitments haven't changed in terms of them wanting to have sustainable aviation fuel, those market signals are going to continue in the mid to long term. And we want to make sure that we are poised to compete in those future markets.
Thanks so much for joining us here at Iowa Farm Bureau's meeting.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Again, that's Emily Skor, the CEO of Growth Energy. And I'm Brent Barnett on Brownfield, reporting for Acra America.